Hi, I'm Aisha.
And I'm Sean, and we're from the Pacific Centre for Photographic Arts. Photography is such an amazing medium because it leads to so much exploration of life. And I think one of the things that really inspires me about photography is the engagement it gives me with the wider world. I can go out with a camera and look at everyday objects, see things that I know intimately that I do every day, and I can get inspiration from them to photograph. And I'm just so always surprised by having a camera in hand when you do the things you do every day, when you walk to the shops, when you spend time with family, that when you actually have a camera and start to incorporate that into your everyday life, things just seem to appear. You start to be inspired by the way light moves, by people's gestures, by the way they sometimes contemplate thoughts they have. And you start to see the world almost in a slow motion version. I think in the history of visual culture, photography is still a relatively young medium, but as we look forward into the 21st century and beyond, the language of photography, moving and still, is going to be paramount for today's students in their adult lives. Visual culture, photography, imagery that is made of the world is used in so many guises of communication, whether it's journalism, advertising, public relations, art. Photography plays a central part, and what's at the core of that is storytelling. Across all of those uses of photography, it's storytelling. So I think there's a real onus to introduce students to storytelling, visual storytelling, at a young age, and so it becomes second nature to them. And so they don't feel that looking and telling stories with visual images is anything outside the norm of what they're used to. I think it needs to be embedded in their education, and I think an appreciation of the world as it is such an important grounding for realizing where those stories come from. We all have intimate and personal stories. We all have a story to tell, and we all have the capacity to tell our own stories. And I think photography is such an accessible way and such an easily communicable way through internet, through online, social media, but also beyond that in terms of professional pathways that students will have access to with this visual literacy. So I think in looking at an overall scheme of education, you just cannot overstate the importance of visual literacy, and the sooner that starts, the better. It's the process of looking and feeling and being aware of what's around you can just have such great ramifications for individuals and people to connect with one another, to connect with their surroundings. And it's fun. It's really fun, and it's addictive. So once you start looking, you start seeing pictures everywhere. So photography is a wonderful tool to teach people how to appreciate life, family, friends, and experiences, even when you're not photographing. And I think that is a really wonderful aspect of the medium.
I think photography allows appreciation, so appreciation of our intimate surroundings, and that can be friends or family. In my instance, photographing my family and looking at my family history has allowed my own appreciation for them. You know, we all have family members and we all have friends and people we hold close to us, but we may not appreciate them on a deeper level day to day. But I think photography allows that. Allows you to focus on a subject and to appreciate that subject, whether that be friend, family, or even the environment you live in. My family is in Malaysia, and it was only due to the pandemic that I thought about photographing them, even just for myself as a memory. And as my parents are getting older, and so having not photographic kind of evidence of them for myself was really important. Photography as a use of therapy, I think, is important. We don't necessarily need to look at photography as something that is academic. We can look at photography of a way for us to understand things that we don't understand, and the environment or the world around us as it changes constantly. Photography as a record, I think, is really important.
A lot of the time we go through life and we ignore the things that are around us. We take for granted the people who are close to us. Photography gives us a reason to not only be interested in the people in exotic places and exotic locations, but turning the camera on one's own life, one's own experience, can actually change the dynamics of interest that we have for one another and people close to us. We all see each other, the people that we know. We all see the people that we know in a very subjective way. The camera introduces an objective nature of looking, and that distance actually enables us to look closer and to see individuals and the places and the people around us in a new light. It's interesting that the objective nature of photography can actually bring us closer to things that we know. When you see something in real life and then you see a photograph of that same person or that same place, they're different, because in between life you have this language of photography. And once you understand the language of photography, how it changes what life is, what you see, it's really interesting, because inherently the language of photography adds something. When you photograph life as it is, the possibilities of seeing anew are endless, and that is something that I think is available to all of us. It's accessible to all of us, and for the last number of years it's been a foundation not only of our arts practice, but the way in which we engage with the world even without cameras. So photography is a wonderful tool to teach people how to appreciate life, family, friends and experiences, even when you're not photographing. And I think that is a really wonderful aspect of the medium. One of the positive things about photography in our current day is that we don't actually need to make it super technical. You don't need to impress on students the technical aspects, the detail of traditional photographic teaching. If we bring it back, it can be a lot softer an approach. It can be a lot more engaging and a lot more enjoyable in terms of the way we engage with the world and our surroundings through a small little camera or through simply the act of looking, rather than going down a path which is highly technical. So I think in today's day and age, kids they're au fait with technology. They're comfortable with smartphones. They're comfortable in the digital world that necessarily a generation or two ago weren't. And what we need to do, I think, is really valuable for them, is to acknowledge they're comfortable with digital tools, but introduce a more personal and philosophical approach about storytelling. If we bring it back to a small audience and think about telling small stories, I really believe in the things that can happen in those spaces. We have school communities, we have family communities, we have societal communities, and within those spaces there's a lot of growth that can take place for people individually, artistically and professionally. Like now, students with these small audiences and confidence in communication, I think they can then flourish in the wider world. And I think photography and visual language can play a really big part in that.
There's an innocence, I think, looking back at old photos, whether that be, from different archives of the family album. There's an innocence there where people would pick up the camera for themselves and their own personal story. And I think that really is at the core of the way we look at photography and storytelling. The personal is universal, and that's really important to think about and to have in your head when you look at photography, because we all have lives and they're all different, but when they are documented and put out there, everyone has the same story and can relate to that. And I know that's important to tell the kids, because they may feel like they're alone in the world, but through telling their own stories and showing that to their wider audience, they can feel like they're not alone anymore.
Undoubtedly, there's a vulnerability in expressing yourself honestly. We all feel that, whether we're children, teenagers, young adults. I don't think that necessarily gets any easier. But if we can impress on the young people of today that those vulnerabilities can be the source of great empowerment, then I think we're getting somewhere to the core of what photography can contribute to a personal understanding, self-awareness, and self-growth. Isn't that what we're all about with our students, empowering them to actually grow as people?